What's going on, guys? Today we are going to be replacing the belt tensioner. Now, on these E36s, on the M50s and M52s, the belt tensioner is actually a multiple piece tensioner. It's not just one component alone. So, we're going to be replacing the actual hydraulic piston, the actual tensioner itself, and we're going to be replacing the bearing that runs the pulleys. Tools we will be using: 8mm socket, a 3/8 driver, and these guys are to get the belt off. That's the tensioner tool you will need. It's an 8mm. If you want to use an Allen key, that works too. I find you get a lot more leverage with using a wrench like this. You can also use one of those. That's like a 3/8 breaker bar kind of deal going on, and that thing works exceptionally well for getting the belt tensioner loose. We'll also be using that 8mm to take the bearing off. So you turn right, loosen the tensioner to take the belt off, you rotate it left to get the bearing off. We will be using 13mm sockets. I have a deep well and I have a short well. Both of those I used. One thing I want to run over real quick is for the replacement you will have to have the belt off of the pulleys. So we're going to have to get the tensioner loose and get the belt off before we can remove and reinstall the new components. Rundown: the belt tensioner is an 8mm Allen key. I like to use a 3/8 driver on it. Basically, we're just going to compress the tensioner and pull the belt off. Have to pull it off the car, just off the pulleys, so we can work on them. So I'm not going to go too much into detail about how to get the belt off. If you have any questions regarding getting the belt off, I have a video for belts specifically in the description of the video. Be sure to check that out if you guys have any questions on how to get the belt off. I'll also go through some of the differences with this car versus a factory E36. So here we have a belt tensioner. This is on an M50, but it is the same on the M50 too. Now how this guy works: take your wrench and you compress the tensioner like that, and you get the belt on and off. For replacing it, we're going to have to take the bearing off before we can get the rest of the housing off. So instead of turning it this way to compress the tensioner, we're going to turn it this way to take the tensioner off, and he's on there pretty tight. So I have this serpentine belt tensioner. So this is basically like a big 3/8 breaker bar that I'm going to be using, and I'm just going to take him and I'm going to walk him to the left and unscrew that guy. Basically just twists off. Okay. But there we go. So now the tensioner bearing is removed, and if this is all you're replacing, pop that bolt on, pop it in the new one, thread that guy back on. But since we're replacing the actual hydraulic behind it, we're going to have to take the rest of it off. There's a bolt right here, a bolt right here, and a bolt right there that need to come off. And then this whole tensioner unit will come off and we can start working on it. Alright, so there's our pulley. I'm going to take our new pulley, field washer, and this little backing plate off. Backing plate goes on like that. So the little bow, one lip is lowered, so that lowered lip, it sort of sits so that it's facing up. You don't want to put this guy on backwards. And we stick the bolt through, and now that guy can go back on the tensioner if you're just replacing the bearing. And now the tensioner housing comes off. There's the middle bolt. There's the upper bolt, and there's the tensioner assembly. There we go. The tensioner assembly is out. Alright, so now we got the tensioner assembly out. All we're going to be doing is taking another 13 and taking the top bolt off. So I find if you hold the tensioner down and like push down, you can sort of use the table as leverage to get it out a lot easier. There we go. Alright, so now we got the new tensioner. And before you put the new one on, it'd be a good idea to take this apart and get some more lube in there. There are little bearings inside of here, and it's just a good idea to get them all nice and lubed up while it's here. So I'm going to take a little bit of multi-purpose grease I got here and just rub a little bit around the bearing where the bearings contact guy goes back together. A little bit on that guy too. Now that open-ended rubber part slides back on top of that guy. He comes around. So we're just going to get him nice and tight. So I thought I should mention this, but I thought I should mention it after I reinstalled the new tensioner. What I wanted to talk about and mention here is the relationship between these two guys. So when you install this new hydraulic tensioner, it doesn't match up perfectly. You're going to have to either compress this tensioner a little bit or bolt it on and then pop this guy down into its seat. What I find when I install it straight out is basically when you just bolt this on, this section of the tensioner will be sitting up. It'll be sitting a little bit higher. It won't sit perfectly in the bearing. And you can check that this inner bearing is sitting flush with where it seats to. See that little metal round part in there? That's actually the housing, not the pulley, and the bearing sits right there. Oftentimes when you install it, it won't be sitting flush. And what happens when you install it in the car is the idler pulley will hit this section right here and not be able to spin. So if you run into that problem, just take it back out, set it on the table, and just put your body weight on it, or get this thing smashed down. You can use a vise or whatever to get it to sit properly. Otherwise, you're going to have interference issues with the idler pulley scratching up against that. So I've moved the alternator out of the way so you guys can get an idea how the install looks. Basically so you guys can watch me do it. Found that if you put the tensioner on, you won't be able to get this bolt on, at least not with the electric fan here. You might be able to get it in between the blades of a clutch-driven fan. So for this, I'm going to drop the bolts on first before we start going after it. And I'm actually going to put our lower bolt on first. So I'm going to get that guy into position, a couple threads on him, and then I'm going to come up for the upper guy. It's kind of hard because you can't really see where the threads go. You can't really see where everything threads in, but with the alternator out of the way, it's a lot easier. You do not have to take the alternator off to get this on. Then our last bolt goes right behind. I'm going to run these guys on. And I couldn't really find a torque spec for these guys, so I'm just going to get them nice and snug. But I'm not going to freaking He-Man them, because I don't want them to strip or have the bolt break off, because that would suck. Now from here, now we put our new pulley on. Couldn't find the torque spec for him either. I think I'm just going to compress the pulley a few times, and that should be tight. Alright, that's it. Basically now from here we just reinstall our belt and we're good to go. That's it, our belt's back on. Good to go. Our belt tensioner and our pulley is replaced. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later. You should take it slow.